They said the cowboy was too hard to love. Until she kissed the scars no one else would touch, the town sat quietly between wide fields and long dirt roads, a place where people believed they already knew how every story would end. Life there moved slowly, guided by routine, old habits, and opinions that had been passed down for years. Everyone knew everyone, and if someone didn't speak much, the town filled the silence for them. That was exactly what had happened with the cowboy. He had lived on the edge of town for as long as most people could remember. His ranch stood alone. Surrounded by fences he repaired himself, and land he worked without help. He rode out before the sun rose and returned when the sky was already dark. People said he preferred it that way. They said he was hard, distant, and not meant for love. Some said life had shaped him that way. Others said he had chosen it. The truth was simpler. He didn't talk because talking had once cost him too much. People noticed the scars first. They showed on his hands, his arms, and sometimes along his neck when his collar slipped. No one asked where they came from, but everyone guessed. Ranch accidents, fights, loss, pain. The guesses grew into stories, and the stories became warnings. Mothers told their daughters to stay away. Friends told friends he wasn't worth the trouble. In a town where reputation meant everything, his was already written. Then she arrived. She didn't come with noise or attention. There was no big announcement, no celebration. She came with a small bag, a tired smile, and eyes that noticed more than she said. She rented a modest house near the main road and took a job that didn't require much explanation. To the town, she was new, and new always meant interesting for a while. It didn't take long before people started talking to her about him. They mentioned his name carefully at first, like it carried weight. They warned her kindly, then more firmly. They told her he was difficult, cold, and closed off. They said he didn't care about anyone but his land and his horse. Some said he had a temper. Others said he had no heart left to give. Every warning ended the same way: stay away. She listened. She always did. But she noticed something strange. No one spoke with anger. They spoke with fear and assumption, not experience. Very few could say they truly knew him. Her first real glimpse of him came on a quiet afternoon. She had gone into town for supplies, still learning which roads led where. As she stepped outside the store, she saw him across the street. He stood beside his horse, tall and still, his hat pulled low. He wasn't doing anything unusual. He wasn't angry or loud. He was simply there. What caught her attention was his stillness. While the town moved around him, he stayed quiet, like he didn't belong to the noise. People passed him without stopping. Some nodded. Some looked away. He didn't chase conversation or avoid it. He accepted the space others left. When his eyes lifted briefly and met hers, something unexpected happened. There was no hardness in them, no threat, just caution. A man who had learned to measure the world before stepping into it. He mounted his horse and rode away without another glance. She stood there longer than necessary, unsure why her chest felt tight. Over the next few days, she noticed him more. Not because he demanded attention, but because he didn't. He moved like someone used to being alone. He fixed fences himself. He carried supplies without help. When he spoke, it was only when needed, and his voice was low, steady, and calm. Their first exchange was simple. She had taken a wrong turn while walking one evening and ended up near his land. The sun was setting fast, and the path was unfamiliar. She saw him repairing a fence and hesitated, remembering the warnings. But getting lost felt worse than asking for directions. She approached slowly, keeping her distance. "Sorry," she said, her voice polite but unsure. "Can you tell me how to get back to the main road?" He looked up, surprised more than anything. For a moment he said nothing. She wondered if she had made a mistake. Then he pointed. "Follow that line, don't take the left turn. It'll circle you back." That was it. No rudeness, no warmth, just help. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once and returned to his work. She walked away feeling strange. That wasn't the man everyone had described. After that, their interactions remained brief. A nod in town, a quiet greeting if paths crossed, no long talks, no questions. Still, she felt something shifting. Not attraction exactly, curiosity mixed with recognition. He reminded her of parts of herself she rarely showed. She had her own reasons for starting over, her own memories she didn't share. Pain teaches people how to build walls, and she had learned well. She recognized the same careful distance in him. The town noticed her interest before she did. People started asking questions. They reminded her again who he was. They told her not to waste her kindness. They warned her that some people didn't change. She smiled and listened, but she didn't promise anything. What the town didn't see were the small moments. They didn't see him slow his horse when passing her on the road. They didn't see how he checked the weather reports carefully before storms, making sure nearby homes were prepared. They didn't see him leave supplies quietly when someone's fence broke. He never stayed for thanks. They also didn't see the way he watched her from a distance, never staring, just aware. He didn't approach her. He didn't try to charm her. He seemed unsure what to do with someone who didn't flinch at his silence. One evening, the sky opened with rain, heavy and sudden. She was caught walking back home when the storm grew worse. Mud slowed her steps and thunder shook the ground. Before she could panic, she heard hoofbeats behind her. He stopped a few feet away. "You'll get soaked," he said simply. "Get on." She hesitated only a second. As they rode, neither spoke. Rain blurred the world around them, but she felt steady, safe. His presence was solid, careful, not rushed. When they reached her place, she thanked him. He tipped his hat and turned back without waiting. That night, she thought about the space between what people said and what she had seen, about how easy it was for a town to decide someone's worth without understanding their wounds. The cowboy returned to his quiet life, but something had shifted. He noticed her laughter now, light and rare. He noticed how she never pushed, never demanded. She noticed how he lingered a moment longer when saying goodbye, how his shoulders relaxed just a little when she was near. The town still believed he was too hard to love. Neither of them knew yet how much that belief was about to be tested. After that rainy evening, things did not suddenly change, but they did not stay the same either. Life returned to its usual rhythm on the surface, yet small shifts began to form underneath, quiet and steady, like water shaping stone over time. Neither of them spoke about that ride home, but both remembered it. She continued settling into town, learning faces, routines, and unspoken rules. People greeted her more easily now. Some smiled with genuine warmth. Others smiled with curiosity, watching closely. They noticed where she walked, who she spoke to, and how often her path crossed with his. The town never missed small details. The cowboy remained the same to everyone else. He worked long hours, kept his head down, and stayed away from gatherings. But to her, there were changes she could feel rather than see. When their paths crossed, his nod lasted a second longer. When he spoke, his tone softened just slightly. He still didn't offer stories or explanations, but he no longer closed himself off completely. She learned that silence could be a language of its own. One morning, she stopped by a small local place for coffee. It was early, earlier than most people liked, but she had grown used to quiet mornings. As she turned, cup in hand, she nearly bumped into him. He caught the cup before it spilled, his grip firm but gentle. "Careful," he said. "Thanks," she replied, surprised at how natural it felt. They stood there for a moment, unsure whether to move on or speak. Around them, the world carried on, unaware of the small pause forming between two guarded lives. "You settling in okay?" he asked finally. It was a simple question, but it meant more than he realized. It was the first time he had asked her anything personal. "Yes," she said honestly, "it's quiet, I like that." He nodded. "Quiet's not a bad thing." "No," she agreed, "it is." That was all. Yet when they went their separate ways, she felt lighter. He felt unsettled in a way that wasn't unpleasant. Over the next weeks, these moments grew. They were still brief, still careful, but they happened more often. A shared glance, a short walk, a few words exchanged without effort. He never asked about her past. She never asked about his. Somehow that made the space between them feel safer. She noticed things others overlooked. She noticed how he fed his horse before himself, how he fixed broken things instead of replacing them, how he paused to watch the sky before storms, as if respecting its power. She noticed the tiredness in his eyes that came not from work but from years of carrying weight alone. He noticed her patience. She never rushed him, never filled silence with nervous talk. She listened when he spoke, even when his words were few. She didn't look at his scars with curiosity or fear. If her eyes passed over them, it was without judgment. That mattered more than compliments ever could. One afternoon, she helped a neighbor with a small task. He happened to pass by and saw her struggling with something too heavy for one person. Without a word, he stepped in and lifted it easily. When she thanked him, he shrugged it off, but his ears turned slightly red. "You didn't have to," she said. "I know," he replied. That answer stayed with her. The town continued to whisper. Some people shook their heads. Others smiled knowingly, convinced it would end badly. They believed they were protecting her. They believed pain could be predicted. What they didn't understand was that she wasn't trying to change him. She wasn't trying to save him. She was simply meeting him where he stood. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she found herself near his ranch again. This time, she hadn't taken a wrong turn. She had walked there intentionally, though she wasn't sure why. She stopped at the gate, unsure if she should go further. He saw her from a distance and approached, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I just wanted to say hello." He studied her face, searching for something, demand, expectation, pressure. Finding none, he opened the gate. "Want some water?" he offered. She nodded. They sat on the steps of the small structure nearby, sipping quietly. The land stretched wide around them, calm and open. It felt honest. "You don't have to come out here," he said after a while. "People talk." She smiled slightly. "People always talk." He glanced at her. "Doesn't bother you?" "Not really," she answered. "They don't know you." He looked away. "Maybe they do." She shook her head gently. Knowing about someone isn't the same as knowing them. That sentence landed deeper than she intended. He went quiet, staring out at the fields. "No one else ever said that," he admitted. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. That night after she left, he sat alone longer than usual. Memories surfaced, ones he had buried under routine and work. Times when he had trusted and paid the price. Times when opening up had led to loss. He had promised himself never again. Yet here she was, not asking for anything, not demanding proof, simply present. Days later, an unexpected event shook the town. A fence broke during the night, letting livestock wander dangerously close to the road. Before anyone could organize help, he was already there, working under the early sky. She arrived shortly after, drawn by concern. "You shouldn't be here," he said, noticing her muddy shoes. "You shouldn't be doing this alone," she replied. He paused, then handed her a tool. They worked side by side, focused, quiet, effective. It felt natural, like something they had always done. When it was over, they stood there, tired but satisfied. "You didn't have to help," he said. "I know," she answered. This time he smiled, just a little. The smile surprised both of them. That was when he realized the truth he had avoided. She wasn't a passing moment. She wasn't a distraction. She was someone who saw him clearly and still chose to stay near, and that scared him more than being alone ever had. He began pulling back without meaning to. Shorter answers, fewer shared moments. She noticed immediately. Old fears stirred in her chest. She wondered if she had misread everything, but instead of confronting him, she waited. One evening, he finally spoke. "I'm not easy," he said quietly as they stood near the road. "People leave." She met his eyes. "I know." "You don't know why," he said. "I don't need to," she replied. He searched her face again, the same careful way he always did. "I'm not promising anything," he said. She nodded. Neither am I. That honesty eased something in him. It felt fair, balanced. As they parted that night, the space between them felt different. He still carried his past. She still carried hers. But now there was something shared between them, an understanding built not on words but on presence. The town still believed the cowboy was too hard to love, but slowly, quietly, something stronger than belief was forming. As the days passed, the space between them grew deeper, not wider. It was no longer just quiet moments or small favors. Something unseen was forming, built slowly through trust, patience, and shared understanding. Still, neither of them named it. Naming things made them real, and real things could be lost. He continued his routines, but now she was part of the rhythm of his days. Sometimes she stopped by with no reason other than to check on him. Sometimes he appeared near her place, saying he was just passing by, though both knew that wasn't always true. Their conversation stayed simple yet meaningful. They spoke about weather, work, small-town habits, and the land. They avoided deeper subjects not because they didn't matter but because they mattered too much. The town watched closely. People noticed how often she walked toward his land. They noticed how he no longer avoided town completely. Whispers followed her steps. Some were curious. Some were critical. A few were quietly hopeful, but most believed this connection would end the same way others had, with disappointment. She felt the pressure, but she didn't let it guide her. She had lived her life shaped by other people's expectations before, and she knew where that path led. This time, she chose her own pace. One afternoon, the heat was heavy, and the air felt still. He had been working longer than usual, fixing damage left behind by a recent storm. She arrived with water and a small cloth, noticing the tension in his shoulders. "You're pushing yourself," she said gently. He shrugged. "Work needs doing." "So do people," she replied. He looked at her, surprised. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means rest matters," she said, "even for strong people." He didn't argue. He sat down, letting the silence settle. She handed him the water. As he drank, she noticed his hands more closely than before. The scars were clearer in the sunlight. Some were thin and pale. Others were rough, deeper, shaped by time and effort. She didn't stare, but she didn't look away either. "You don't have to look at those," he said quietly, noticing her gaze. "I'm not afraid of them," she replied. "That's not why people look away," he said. "Why do they?" she asked. "Because they remind them that pain stays," he answered. She thought for a moment. "Or that someone survived." He didn't respond, but something shifted in his expression. That evening, the sky darkened earlier than expected. Clouds gathered heavy and low. Thunder rolled in the distance. She was still there when the first drops fell. "You should head back," he said. "Storm's coming." She hesitated. "Are you okay?" He nodded, but his eyes betrayed him. Something about storms unsettled him more than he admitted. "I can stay a bit," she offered. He shook his head. "You don't need to." "I know," she said softly, "but I want to." That was the moment he stopped pretending. The rain came hard, forcing them inside the small structure nearby. The sound filled the space, loud and constant. For a while, neither spoke. He sat with his arms resting on his knees, staring at the ground. "You ever wonder why people decide who someone is?" he said suddenly, without ever asking. "Yes," she replied, "all the time. They decided for me a long time ago," he said. "I just stopped correcting them." She waited, letting him continue at his own pace. "There are things I did," he went on, "things I couldn't stop, moments I wish I could undo. The scars aren't the worst part, it's what they remind me of." She turned toward him, careful not to rush. "You don't have to tell me," she said. "I want to," he answered, surprising himself. He spoke slowly, choosing words like fragile objects. He talked about loss, about responsibility taken too young, about mistakes made while trying to survive. He didn't paint himself as a hero. He didn't ask for sympathy. He simply told the truth. She listened without interruption. When he finished, the rain had softened, but the air between them felt heavy. "That's why people leave," he said. "Eventually." She reached out, resting her hand near his, not touching yet. "They left because they couldn't sit with pain," she said. "Not because you're unlovable." He laughed quietly without humor. "That's easy to say." She looked at him fully then. "I'm not saying it easily." Her hand moved, touching his scarred knuckles gently. He tensed at first, instinctively pulling back, then stopped himself. Her touch wasn't curious or hesitant. It was calm, respectful. She leaned closer and pressed a soft kiss against one of the old scars on his hand. Time seemed to pause. No one had ever done that before. No one had ever treated those marks as anything but reminders of damage. Her gesture wasn't dramatic. It wasn't meant to fix him. It simply said, "I see this and I'm still here." His breath caught. He looked away, overwhelmed by something he didn't know how to name. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Because they're part of you," she replied, "and I don't want to pretend they're not." The rain stopped completely. Silence filled the room, but it was different now, warmer, safer. After that night, nothing could return to how it had been before. He tried to retreat again, afraid of what that moment meant. But she didn't chase him, and she didn't disappear either. She stayed steady, present, unchanged. That consistency wore down walls he had spent years building. The town noticed the difference. They saw him smile more, even if just briefly. They saw her confidence grow. Some began to soften their opinions. Others waited for the fall they believed was coming, but the connection between them deepened. One evening, as they walked together under a quiet sky, he stopped and looked at her. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to be what someone deserves." She met his gaze. "I'm not asking you to be anything other than honest." "That might not be enough," he said. "It is for me," she answered. He nodded slowly, letting those words settle. For the first time in years, the scars didn't feel like warnings. They felt like proof that he was still standing, and that someone was finally willing to stand beside him. After that night, nothing felt the same, yet everything looked almost unchanged from the outside. The town still woke early. The roads were still dusty. The land still stretched wide and quiet. But inside both of them, something had shifted into a place that could not be ignored. He tried to return to his old habits. He woke before sunrise, worked until his body ached, and kept his distance when he could. He told himself that closeness was dangerous, that letting someone see too much always led to loss. Fear had protected him for years. Letting go of it felt like standing without armor. She noticed the distance immediately. He still greeted her, still helped when needed, still showed up when it mattered. But there was a hesitation now, a careful pause before words, before steps, before moments that once came naturally. She understood why, but understanding did not stop the quiet ache growing in her chest. She had promised herself long ago that she would never beg to be chosen. So instead of pushing, she stayed steady. Days passed, then weeks. They moved around each other carefully, like two people learning how not to break something fragile. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. One evening, tension finally found its voice. They were walking together when he stopped suddenly, his jaw tight. "This can't go on like this," he said. She turned to face him, calm but alert. "Like what?" "Like I don't know what I'm doing," he replied. "Like I'm pulling you into something I don't understand." She crossed her arms, not defensively, but to hold herself together. "I didn't ask you to have all the answers. I don't have many," he said, "and the ones I do have aren't good." She took a slow breath. "I'm not afraid of imperfect." He shook his head. "You should be." That hurt more than she expected. "Do you really think I don't know how hard this is?" she asked quietly. "Or do you just think I'm not strong enough to choose it?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth sat heavy between them. "I think," he said slowly, "that one day you'll wake up and realize I'm not worth the effort." She stepped closer. "That's not your decision to make." Silence followed, thick and heavy. He looked away first. That night she went home feeling exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. She wondered if patience had limits, if staying quiet meant slowly disappearing. She didn't want to lose herself while trying to understand him. He spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words. He knew he was afraid, but fear no longer felt like safety. It felt like distance, and distance felt like loss. The next morning, he didn't go straight to work. He went to her place. She opened the door, surprised. "I don't want to run," he said before she could speak. "I just don't know how to stay." Her expression softened, but she didn't rush forward. "Staying doesn't mean being perfect," she said. "It means showing up, even when it's uncomfortable." He nodded. "I can try." "Trying is all I'm asking," she replied. From that day on, things became harder and better. They argued sometimes, not loudly, not cruelly, but honestly. He struggled to express emotions he had buried for years. She struggled not to interpret his silence as rejection. They made mistakes. They misunderstood each other, but instead of walking away, they talked. Slowly. Carefully. He began to open up in small pieces, stories about his past that weren't dramatic, just heavy, moments where he had chosen survival over softness, times when he had trusted and been left behind. He didn't share everything at once. She didn't ask him to. She shared too. About her own losses, about learning to stand alone when support vanished, about how starting over wasn't brave at first, it was necessary. They found comfort in these shared truths. The town noticed the changes more clearly now. They saw him laugh once openly, without restraint. They saw her walking beside him without hesitation. Some people softened, others remained doubtful. A few spoke openly, warning her again. She listened, then smiled politely and continued on her way. What they didn't see were the nights they sat quietly together, saying nothing, finding peace in presence. What they didn't see were the moments when he almost pulled away and chose not to. What they didn't see was the effort it took for both of them to stay. One evening after a long day, he reached for her hand without thinking. She felt it immediately, the choice behind the gesture. "You okay?" he asked, unsure. "Yes," she said, squeezing his hand. "Are you?" He nodded. "I think I am." It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It didn't need to be. There were still hard days. Days when old habits whispered that leaving would be easier. Days when silence crept in uninvited. But now, silence didn't mean absence. It meant rest. One night, sitting under a sky full of stars, he spoke softly. "I always thought love meant losing yourself," he said, "or losing someone else." She leaned against his shoulder. "Sometimes it means learning to stay whole together." He smiled just slightly. The cowboy didn't suddenly become easy to love. He became willing. Willing to be seen, willing to be honest, willing to stay even when fear told him to leave. And she, patient but strong, chose him, not because he was flawless, but because he was real. The town still talked. But for the first time, their voices mattered less than the quiet truth growing between two people who were learning, day by day, how to stay. Time moved forward the way it always did, quietly, without asking permission. Seasons changed, days shortened and lengthened again, and life continued its steady rhythm. But for them, time no longer felt like something to endure. It felt like something to build within. They were not perfect. They never pretended to be. There were mornings when he woke with old heaviness in his chest, memories rising without warning. There were evenings when she felt tired from being strong, from always choosing patience. But now, they faced those moments together instead of alone. He learned that staying did not mean losing himself. It meant allowing space for someone else without fear. She learned that loving someone deeply did not require sacrificing her own voice. They adjusted slowly, like people learning a new language, one spoken through actions more than words. The town watched their story settle into something steady. People noticed how he no longer rushed through town with his head down. They noticed how he stopped to speak, even if briefly. They noticed how his posture changed, how his shoulders didn't always carry the same weight. They noticed her confidence too, how she walked with purpose, how she no longer hesitated under others' opinions. Some admitted they had been wrong, others stayed quiet. A few never changed their minds at all, but that no longer mattered. One afternoon, a problem arose on a nearby ranch. A storm had damaged equipment and help was needed quickly. Without hesitation, he stepped forward. She joined him, working alongside others. People watched as they moved together easily, understanding each other without instructions. Someone whispered, "He's different." Another replied, "No, he's just not alone anymore." Later that evening, as they rested under a wide sky, she looked at him thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "they're starting to see what I see." He smiled gently. "They don't need to," she nodded. "I know." That was the difference now. Approval was no longer the goal, peace was. There came a moment, quiet and ordinary, that changed everything. They were sitting together after a long day, the kind that leaves you tired but content. He reached for her hand, tracing her fingers slowly. "I've been thinking," he said. She turned toward him. "That sounds serious." "It is," he replied with a small smile. "I spent years believing I was someone people had to survive loving. I thought my past made me unsafe." She listened, already knowing where this was going. "But you never treated me like something broken," he continued. "You didn't rush me or try to fix me. You stayed. That taught me something." She squeezed his hand. "What did it teach you?" "That love isn't about being easy," he said. "It's about being willing." Her eyes softened. "I don't promise to be perfect," he went on. "I still have days when the past feels heavy, but I promise to keep choosing this, choosing us." She took a deep breath, emotion rising but steady. "I don't need perfection," she said. "I need honesty. I need effort. I need someone who stays." "I can do that," he replied, "every day." The commitment was quiet, but it was real. From then on, life unfolded in small, meaningful ways. Shared mornings, long conversations under open skies, silence that felt safe instead of empty. They built a routine that belonged to them, not shaped by fear or rumor. The scars were still there. They didn't fade or disappear, but they changed meaning. They were no longer symbols of something to hide. They became reminders of strength, of survival, of growth. Sometimes she would trace them gently, not with sadness but with respect. He no longer pulled away. One day, as they walked through town together, someone approached him, a person from his past. There was tension, old memories stirring. He felt the familiar urge to retreat. She stood beside him, steady and calm. He spoke honestly, briefly, without anger or defense. When it was over, he exhaled deeply. "I would have handled that differently before," he admitted. She smiled. "You handled it well." "I didn't feel like running," he said quietly. That realization stayed with him. The town slowly accepted what it could not change. Stories turned into acceptance. Warnings turned into quiet acknowledgement. People moved on to other things, as towns always do, but their story remained, simple, real, and quietly strong. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the land glowed warm and open, she leaned against him. "They said you were too hard to love," she said softly. He looked down at her. "Were they right?" She shook her head. "No, you were just waiting for someone who didn't love halfway." He considered that, then smiled. "And you," he asked, "did loving me change you?" "Yes," she answered honestly. "It taught me that staying doesn't mean losing myself. It means choosing something real." They stood there, wrapped in a silence full of meaning. The cowboy was still strong, still quiet, still shaped by his past, but now he was also open. And she, patient, brave, and grounded, had never been stronger. Their love didn't erase scars, it honored them. And in that quiet town, under wide skies and open land, two people proved that sometimes the hardest hearts aren't unlovable. They are simply waiting for someone brave enough to stay.